Becoming a CEO of the brand was the next step I was looking for because I had been sales director, I had been in the key market. When you pick up a job, if you come after a manager, a CEO or a team that squeezed all the lemons, there is not much juice to get. I knew with Zenith the leverage was still very big. Each risk was a little step to the victory.
Good afternoon and greetings from sunny Geneva. Welcome again to the Learnings of Leaders series. As always, I'm joined by Peter Vanham, the author of Before I Wasn't CEO, and today we have the immense privilege to have Mr. Julien Tornare, the CEO of Zenith Watches. I would also like to thank our partner for this conference, the Geneva Chamber of Commerce and Industry, who has been inviting Mr. Tornare. Is a contact of Mr. Tornare, and he's the reason why they are the reason why he's with us today. So thank you, the Chamber, to be a partner of EU Business School. Peter, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Luc, and it's indeed good to see you and see everyone on this sunny day. And as you say, it's a great pleasure to welcome Julien Tornare. Maybe also a little bit symbolic then, if it's a sunny day, that we're welcoming the leader of Zenith, the company of watches, of course, not the zenith of the sky. But we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Julien, I want to talk about so many things with you, and thank you, of course, for being with us. But obviously, as always, we want to check in with you first on yourself. How are you? How is the company doing? How are you dealing with the current challenges caused by the COVID crisis?
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Luc. I'm very happy and honored to be here today with you all and to share this discussion with you. Of course, we just went through such a difficult period of time for everyone. And I think it's been a really difficult time, but we also learned a lot during this time. We had to close down the company on March 17th. We had to work from home. We had to transform ourselves, to modify the way we're doing. We had to increase our digital operation. And I think it's been a very tough but learning curve again for a company like Zenith, as all other companies.
Right. I mean, and obviously, you don't need to explain in detail why it would be tough for any company to be operating a business during the COVID crisis. I mean, the mere fact, of course, that you have retail stores means you have to close them and you'll lose a big part of your business. That's quite obvious. What I want to talk to you about a little bit more in detail, though, is this notion of the comeback, of the recovery. How is it possible to get out of this crisis, at least on the economic front? And for you maybe to talk us through a little bit, because I believe you have a lot of clients, don't you, in Asia, in China, of course, maybe one of your biggest markets, the biggest perhaps. And there, of course, from the start of the crisis, they've been ahead of the curve, let's say. They've been ahead of the world. How is your business in China doing?
Absolutely. I mean, you're asking a very smart question because it all started in Asia. And I have to say, we all started by writing scenarios about an Asian crisis, as we had some in the past. But very quickly and already early March, mid-March, we realized it would become a worldwide crisis. And because Asia entered first and certainly made also very good decision on how to manage this situation, they also started to come out first. And we made the decision to close the company on March 17th. But already end of April, we had a lot of requests coming from Asia because China was starting step by step to reopen. So we sent a first group of people, very small group, 10 to 12 people, basically to ship a few watches that were about to be shipped when we did the lockdown, to receive watches that were coming back for service, to have answer to requests and different things that we couldn't do from home. So it gave back a sort of a life to the company very early May already, thanks to Asia. And we started to sell in Asia already at that time. So yes, China definitely and Asia in the run helped us to resume business to a certain extent. Yeah.
Help us understand China as a country. How big of a market is it for you, and how big it is for an average luxury brand?
It's huge. In general, China in the luxury business means between 40, 50, 60. Some brands, they depend on 80% to Chinese clients. In the case of Zenith, we are more into a 40%, roughly, more or less, between local China and travel retail. So it's a very important market. And we consider that it's also the market of the future. I mean, we are growing everywhere locally, but China, from a demographic point of view, but also for the taste for luxury goods that Chinese have, it's definitely the market where we are putting a lot of energy at the moment. Yeah.
I mean, essentially what I hear you say is that in terms of luxury goods, in terms of the luxury market, it is China and the rest of the world.
Yes and no, but I mean, we could say that because China has been playing such an important role since early 2000, I would say. It's been the growth engine. As you know, and we'll talk about that later, but I was living in Hong Kong and I was going almost every week in mainland China, and I could see not only the growing power of China for the luxury business, but also the transition between the very first generation of Chinese buying European, American luxury, and then the second generation. And I was lucky to be there at that time. So it's definitely a country where there is a taste for luxury again, and there is a will to acquire luxury. Very strong.
Right. It's something we'll talk about in a minute indeed, but just that notion of the first and the second generation, of course, you talk about real generations. I mean, the sons and the daughters of the first generation are the second generation, but it also has a second meaning, doesn't it? It's also a second generation in terms of they are not looking automatically anymore to what's hot in the US or what's hot in Europe. No, they develop their own taste and they say, are you a genuine brand in our country, in our market, and in that sense too, they differ from the previous generation, don't they?
Definitely. I mean, when I mean first generation, it's mostly people that were born and raised in China, of course, but they lived most of their life in China. The first door to the Western world was basically Hong Kong, and this generation, they were going massively to Hong Kong or close by, nearby locations around China. For obvious language reasons, because most people, they could speak only Mandarin or Cantonese. And of course, the second generation, they became much closer to Westerners. They're much more global citizens. They studied abroad, they speak English, they travel around the world. So they are also evolving in terms of how they approach luxury. They were born in a pretty wealthy family for those buying luxury. So they're getting closer to worldwide clients versus their parents' generation. Yeah.
Global luxury consumers, but with Chinese characteristics. Can we summarize it like that?
Absolutely.
That's excellent. To close the point on COVID and on your stores, so what can I imagine? I'm in Hong Kong, I'm in Beijing, I'm in Shanghai. I can go shopping, and if it is in its store, and if I go to one of those stores, plenty of other people around me.
Sorry, I missed the last, it was cut.
Just to close that, just to get a sense of how it is right now on the ground in a Zenith store in your major Asian markets. They're open, in business, receiving clients, and if I go there, probably I won't even be the only person in the store.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm receiving sales every day on my cell phone, and thank God we have China. Thank God we have Asia, I would say, but mostly China at the moment, because this is where the business happens. And the big question when we had the lockdown was, and you had two schools of thoughts. Are people going to be like, the year is tough, stock market is down, what can we do? Let's stay quiet. We don't feel like buying luxury. And some other people believe that they like it so much that the day they can resume buying, they will jump into the stores. And I think we experienced that with Zenith, but all my colleagues from the different businesses, they are doing very good numbers. I can tell you that this month is going to be my first positive numbers since February, plus numbers versus last year.
That's crazy. So you're saying not just have we seen a resurgence in sales, have we seen a recovery from the minus point, but year over year, if I look at June 2020 versus June 2019, you're saying my global sales up.
In China.
In China. And of course, China being 40-50% of the business, huge relief, of course, for your global business as well. That's remarkable. Do you think that may explain, we were so mystified, many of us, by the jumps in the stock market globally. You know, we saw a huge recovery in stock prices, wondering, where did that come from? We're not seeing retail sales. We're not seeing consumer confidence. We're not seeing business confidence. Does it come from China? Is that part of the explanation?
It's difficult to say. I was like you. I was very much thinking about the disconnect between the financial world and between the real economy, because we were experiencing such a way down, such a crash. I mean, speaking about watches, we had globally Swiss exports went down to minus 82% in April. So it was a big, big crash. And the stock market went down and back up. So I still believe there was a disconnect, and I'm still questioning about the fall, how it's going to happen in the fall, because there will be also a big wake-up call everywhere. But again, thank God, in China, at least we see that people still feel like buying luxury. They still go to the shops, and hopefully we won't face a too bad other wave, you know, of this virus, because in Beijing right now it's been closing down again in some areas. So we are concerned about that. But if you go to Shanghai, if you go to Hong Kong, Singapore just reopened. I mean, many places in Asia are very active. So that's news. For now, that's very good news.
And let's hope, of course, that that's met also by similarly good news from the public health perspective, of course, on which we all depend to get out of this pandemic. Julien, we're both in Geneva. You and I are, and Luc is too. So it's quite nice. Some of our viewers, of course, are too. Now it's 2020. We go back in time. You're actually Genevan, aren't you? You are from Geneva.
I am. Yeah. I was born and raised in Geneva a few years ago, and of course, fourth generation of people in Geneva. Very much earlier, originally from Italy, but born and raised in Geneva. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so you're really, let's say, a natural, because we always wonder, people that are selling Swiss watches, that are making Swiss watches, where do they get their passion for that mechanical watch from? I suppose in your case, quite straightforward. You can't set a foot outside the door, or you run into a Swiss watch front or shop. So obviously that's something that probably from a very early age was something that you get acquainted with.
Yes, but I will be honest with you and with people listening to us, because many people in the watch industry, they will tell you, my grandfather gave me a watch when I was 6.5, and I was like, okay, I'm going to work into watches. I'm not going to give you that story because it's not true. And if I want to be honest, I mean, obviously I was born and raised in Geneva. So when you walk in the streets, you see watch stores, you hear watch brands, names and stuff. So you are into the watch culture, clearly. But it came much later, and I would say a bit by coincidence as well, that I ended up into the watch industry. And by starting working in this industry at the age of 25, I basically got the virus. It's not the right word today, but I got the addiction to watches and the love and the passion for watches. But it came on the job, I have to admit.
Yeah, because I think that when you were a kid, rather your passion was somewhere else in Geneva, not on the streets of Geneva, but rather in the water of the Lake of Geneva, wasn't it? You were quite an adept, I think, of one particular water sport.
Yeah, exactly. I think I practiced a lot of water ski for many, many years. And I was the kind of boy to arrive at school with wet hair, waking up very early in the morning, and practicing my sport early in the morning, which helped me a lot in life, I would say. Whether it's for the discipline or for the will to succeed, to do things, to achieve things, this sport experience taught me a lot. Yeah.
Right, but so you obviously, as a 10-year-old, you don't think about whether that will give you discipline later on in life. Oh, no. It's just about, I like this sport. You discovered a sport, and it was just something you really liked.
Absolutely, no. If you ask my teachers, I had close to no discipline at this age.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I found interesting as we talked was that you mentioned, water ski. And when I think water ski, I think, okay, that's like literally the jet set. This is like a very high-end sport, very privileged. But you shared one story of, I think, in the 80s, that actually the mecca of water ski was what was then the Soviet Union, Russia. And you went there.
For sure, and it played an important role for me. As you say, water ski was seen and perceived as a very luxury and exclusive sport. But I was lucky to meet someone actually in Versoix who wanted to make water ski very accessible. So to make it accessible, he asked us to do the job, meaning to organize the training camps, to buy the gas, to buy the food, to do the food ourselves, and to really teach the kids and practice for ourselves independently. So we managed to have a very low price week for kids, and we managed to practice in the center of France, in Limousin, in a small lake, which made the whole week also very, very affordable. And this is in Limousin, in the middle of nowhere, that I met a Russian coach that was practicing there in a club. And that's how started, I would say, a very nice relationship between the Versoix water ski club and the Rybinsk, north of Moscow, water ski club. And we ended up going to Russia to practice water ski. Yeah.
Right, and we're not talking about the Russia of opulence,
No.
of riches of the early 2000s. No, we're talking about the Soviet Union about to collapse 1987.
Absolutely. I was, I was 16 years old when I went there the first time. We took a train for 48 hours. We got there and we were staying within
a train for 48 hours, you say? I heard that.
Yeah, it was a long trip. It was a pretty long trip. And very, very hot, I remember, because it was overheated. The trains were overheated. And I lived like 3 months within a Russian family. I could only speak French. At that time, they obviously could only speak Russian. So we had to manage, and it was tough, but it was a fantastic experience. And my first, I would say, real cultural experience in terms of different culture, because as a kid, I was going to France and Italy and Switzerland. That was it. Here, I was exposed to a very different way of life.
Right. And I suppose you still speak some Russian as a consequence of that.
Yeah, choo-choo.
That's excellent. But so that's your first international experience, and then afterwards, of course, you get on to studies. I suppose in Switzerland, you also have to do your mandatory Swiss military service.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much at that point, a rather straightforward career path. You go to study economics, you go to do your Swiss military service, and you get an extra master's. I think it is in London, right? So far until that age of 25. The water ski, really something special, then regular track as a student.
Yeah, exactly. I was pretty much the kind of Swiss guy who normally ends up into banking, because I did my military, I did the things. And I actually tried some banking with an all-around internship, and I didn't really enjoy it. So I was wondering, what should I do? And I worked for a few months, then I went abroad, as you said, for my master's degree. And this is when I received a phone call from a friend of mine who told me there was a position within a family-owned watch company called Raymond Weil. And they immediately, I flew back from London to Geneva, and we talked about the job. And of course, I was 25, and I was really feeling, I was missing confidence. I believe I just know theory. I need to learn practice, how it's going to happen. And I have to say, it was a great first opportunity for me. Yeah.
No, it certainly was. And, we sometimes wonder also when people, you say, I'm Swiss, so I was going to be a banker. I mean, I can see how it's a natural path, of course, for many people to work in the wealth industry, which is wealth management industry. Same thing with watches. But you say it was more about serendipity. As a matter of fact, if I have to point back, because I don't have a friend that would call me to go and work in the watch industry, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't have those friends. But for you, you had that friend. And actually, I think you mentioned is a mother of a friend, right? And you knew that person, not because of the fact that you were wanting to go work in the watch industry or you wanted to go into banking or whatever it was. It was because of that previous activity of water ski.
Yeah, life sometimes is very surprising. And I have to say, this woman was the mother of a schoolmate. And she basically, because I was actually sick the day they were introduction to water ski in Geneva. I was sick. I didn't receive the paper that was given by the teacher. And she went to my place and she gave it to my mother. And she said, Julien, he likes water. You should take him there. So she was the one that put me basically into the water ski world. And many years later, she called me when I was studying in London. And she asked me, I think you have the right personality for a job that one of my friends' CEO is looking for. So would you mind flying back to Geneva? I had no clue. And I said, okay, I flew back. So to be honest, after those two, because she played a key role in my hiring of that job, and of course in my water ski years. So I was sure she would introduce me my wife at some point, but she never did. You know, I had to find her by myself.
So that's how you ended up in the watch industry. And you mentioned it. You went to work for this small but very known brand, Raymond Weil.
Yeah.
Very often when I hear Swiss watch brands, I'm like, you know, where did they make up that name? In the case of Raymond Weil, it's not really hard to guess. Actually, the CEO of the company was Raymond Weil.
Yeah, actually, I was so lucky because I was 25 and I worked a few years with Mr. Raymond Weil himself, who was the best one. I wish he was still in this world because he would be an amazing guest for you, because he started his company at 56, just after being laid off from another company. And he put this company together at the age of 56 and managed to build an amazing business. And when I was there, he was 72. And I learned a lot from being next to him. From my very first business trip until my last day in the company, he was a great source of inspiration and probably one of my first mentor. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, it's pretty amazing, isn't it? And the role of mentors, and you know, for anyone starting their careers is very important. And of course, to have such a person, you were working directly for Mr. Weil, must have been great. But of course, there's another side to that, isn't there? Which is that once you're working in such a small family company and you're working directly for the founder, then obviously you're 25, 26, 27, you want to get ahead. And then that can become a little bit of a barrier. Was that something that happened to you?
No, for sure. I mean, first of all, at 25, I had probably a job perspective of 2 to 3 years. And yes, as you said, I was reporting to the CEO. Okay, they gave me a few more responsibilities here and there, but I felt like I was a bit claustrophobic. You know, I wanted to know that I had perspective, that I had opportunities ahead of me. And I'm not sure now about students if they still dream about the big names. But when I was
well,
young,
we can ask you later on. We'll see.
Yeah,
We'll hear directly from the students.
Absolutely. When I was 25, I mean, I was dreaming about the big names. And when I approached the Richemont Group, which was a reference in watchmaking and in luxury business, I was super happy to join that group because I knew that they would give me many different opportunities. That's how I got hired at Vacheron Constantin.
And so that's basically what you did then. So you worked a couple of years for Raymond Weil. That gives you that into the watch industry that you need if you want to continue working in it,
For sure.
of course. You have a certain track record, I assume, of you know, doing a couple of things right. You learn a lot from Raymond Weil, a real legend of the industry. And so then you end up with that, you know, big international luxury group that is of which Vacheron Constantin is then another brand is part of it, and that's where you continue your career. Now you're saying, I'm 27, 28, I've got a work horizon, 2 years, 3 years. I mean, I think we all know that, but you worked at Vacheron Constantin for 17 years, I think, isn't that right? So what keeps you there?
It's the main reason is probably people that I met, people that inspired me, gave me opportunities because I was still very hungry and ambitious. So I wanted to move on. And as you said, I expected probably to stay, let's say 2, 3, maybe 5 years. But I thought that I was pretty lucky to meet the right people, and they gave me opportunities because I mean, I worked in Switzerland. I was sent to the US at the age of 32. Then I went to Hong Kong for 7 years. And I didn't see these 17 years, to be honest. I ended up being 40, 43, 44 when I finished at Vacheron. And I never believed I would stay that long.
Right.
It gave me great opportunities. And I really loved and enjoy my jobs. And that's that. When you're older, you realize how much you need to like your job to be happy, to be someone happy. Yeah.
Right. Now, you say, well, I ended up going to the US, I ended up going to Asia, I saw the whole world, which sounds amazing if I'm 28 years old, but that's not the first job they gave you, is it? Because I think you briefly worked as sort of a sales manager or a marketing manager for the Europe and Middle East region, but then very quickly afterwards, you know, that cosmopolitan world that you were in charge of was the Swiss market. So you were going from village to village.
Yeah, but you know, this I made the right decision because my boss at that time, he asked me, do you want to stay an area manager, a sales area manager, supervising basically many markets, but you never really get deep into it. And he said, I need someone to look after the Swiss local market, domestic market. And I thought, you know what? If I learn in depth what's working inside the market, I'm gonna learn a lot, and it's gonna be a very different perspective than being supervising a group of markets. So I said, on the paper, it looks maybe less glamour, but at the end, I will definitely have more credibility to take over a bigger market in the future. And I made the right decision at that time when he gave me the choice. And you know, Switzerland is a great laboratory market because it's small, but you speak let's say I try to speak 3 languages. You meet people from very different parts of the world because Switzerland is about tourists, and 80% of the watches are sold to tourists in Switzerland. So it was a very good laboratory to learn and to develop my skills on one single market. And that's definitely the reason why I got the next jobs as well.
Right. And of course, you don't know that in advance, but perhaps maybe that's a little bit wiser, a little bit older, does give you that argument and say, you know what, I know it doesn't sound like a glamorous job to be looking after the Swiss market when we have the whole world that we look after, but it's going to give you that credibility. And indeed it did, because, you know, you manage the Swiss market, you do it well, which I assume is a difficult market because, hey, you know, if you're telling me in Switzerland, you buy a Swiss watch, I'm like, well, you know, you and 10,000 other people have told me the same thing of different brands. So if you succeed in Switzerland, I suppose it's a little bit like succeeding in New York. You know, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. And that's a good comparison, because the next opportunity you got is no less than the American market.
Yes, and this was a great surprise and also a very important stage in my career, because my boss came to me and said, we have a problem in the US. The brand is doing terrible, and we need to do something. We need to fix that. Are you ready to go? I say, yeah. I barely got engaged, so I said, let me ask my future wife. But overnight, she said, of course, let's go to New York. So we moved to New York, and there I faced a totally, even though it was the same brand, I faced a totally different situation. In a few words, in Switzerland, Vacheron Constantin is such an important brand that good days, bad days, people are going to be nice with you. They're going to keep you in their store. They're going to try to push your brand. They're going to promote, and you can work. You have the respect of the people. In the US, and this is something that I loved about the American market, it's very pragmatic. So when they saw me arriving, they say, who is this little Swiss guy, 32 years old? We don't know him, no credibility. How come he's going to help us? And they basically told me, you know, profit per square foot is very bad. I'm going to kick your brand out of my store. And so suddenly I had a big wake-up call. You know, I thought I was doing a good job in Switzerland. Now I'm going to be challenged.
Right. And so you do that. Now, this is a big step, because you describe it as if it's like, oh, you know, we decided to go to New York overnight. We go to the US, but obviously you change your whole life. You get into a whole new culture, big country, very different attitudes to things. So how do you go about it? I mean, like, what are the things? I mean, how do you do that? How do you make a plan and say, I'm going to double the brand in 2 years, or I'm going to, you know, quadruple the brand in 5 years? What are the key success elements then of getting to that place where you succeed?
So, you know, first of all, about the move and the fact that I know the younger generation and probably the students, they are already willing and open to the world and willing to move abroad. But when I did it, I had a lot of people around me saying, oh, you're so lucky, you're doing it. But you have to seize the opportunity. When someone asks you for such a great opportunity, you have to leave your family, you have to leave your friend behind you, and you have to move there. Because at some point, this is going to make the difference in the future. And many people, the day they get the offer, you go there. They say, oh, you know what? I like my city. I like my house.
You get cold feet.
Exactly. So, but one advice I may give is go for it, because it's going to be such a learning. When I got there, to come back to your question, I'm facing people that are, again, very skeptical, not really welcoming. I mean, they're nice, but they don't want to do business with me. So I'm giving myself 6 months, and I'm asking, first of all, I have no retail. So I'm going, there are 65 partners. I'm going to the top 6 that are, for me, the opinion leaders in the opinion, that are the best retailers. And I'm meeting them individually. And I'm very frankly telling them, I understand you don't trust me. I understand you don't believe my speech, but give me 6 months. to do a business plan, to work with you and to show you that you can make money with my brand. Trust me, I know the brand well. I worked in Switzerland. It's a great brand. I just need to help you on a few different things. And I have to say, out of the 6, 5 trusted me and they agreed. And I did not spend a lot of time home because I was working really, really hard over the few months because I had only this window to trust these opinion leaders. I knew if I could do it, they would talk positively to the rest of the market.
Right.
And the first test would be successful. But
and so it really
I approached it. Yeah.
It really is. Sorry to interrupt you. It really is. It sounds. You look at a market like that. You say it's huge. You don't know where to start. But then you say, if you think about it, don't look at the whole. Think about the parts that it consists of. And the parts that it consists of are a dozen, 2 dozen thought leaders, influencers, even if the word didn't exist perhaps back then, but people that really are going to change other people's minds. And that's how you can win a big market like that.
For sure. And you know, it's not only on the market side. I don't want people to think I'm blaming American dealers during those days. It's also our headquarters at that time. They already had the feel that the future was China, China, and China. So they were investing massively in China, putting more or less all their eggs in the Asian market, and in particular in China. And they thought, you know, Americans, maybe they're not going to buy super high-end luxury watches. They don't like it as much as Asian. And that was a mistake. It's just because the brand didn't do the right work. So I had to convince the retailers, but I also had to come back to Switzerland and say, listen, guys, US is a rich country. There are plenty of clients here. And if we do the right job, we can do a fantastic business in America. But I need your help. I need more communication. I need means to develop the market. I need special products for America, etc., etc. And it was a great challenge and experience for me to work on both sides and to manage to develop the brand.
Right. And of course, there's nothing that says authenticity in terms of selling a Swiss brand, like having an actual Swiss person managing the brand. And the other thing you mentioned, which I thought was quite interesting, you have this description that you mentioned, you know, I gained the market wrist by wrist. Yeah. That's really how you look at it.
Yeah. I like to use this expression because it's literally what I did. I spent my days and evenings in dinners, in events, and I was sometimes crossing the whole country to have a dinner with the watch collectors, and I was selling 5, 6, 7 watches. And I was like, okay, this is people that are happy with the watches. They're going to talk to other people, and step by step, it's going to happen. Vacheron Constantin is a very high-end luxury brand, a very high average price. So you don't sell quantities, you sell experience, you sell quality, and each wrist was a little step to the victory.
Right. That's absolutely an amazing expression. So you succeeded in the US, and you're like, you know what? Maybe we are a little bit homesick. We're okay to go back to Europe. We're okay to go back to Switzerland. Although, of course, there's that call from Asia. There's that you know, the big future. Let's be honest, is there. You thought that at the time. So you come back to Europe. You're kind of settled in here, and then a big opportunity. Manage the whole Asia Pacific for the brand.
Yeah. I mean, as much as the US opportunity came when I did not expect it, when I left the US, I talked to my CEO. I said, listen, I really want to go to Asia at some point. I know after America, Asia is the place to go for luxury business. So I want to be there. But the job was taken. So my CEO told me, listen, I need help here as an international sales director. Join me here, and you have my commitment that at some point, if there is an opportunity in Asia, I will help you to go there. It's okay, fair enough. So we went back home. We make both our families very happy. We come back with a first son and a second one on the way. So everybody's happy to see us. And when we barely finish unpacking, the guy in Asia is leaving, and my boss is telling me that there is the job for all Asia Pacific responsibility based in Hong Kong. And I'm like, okay, let's repack and go, because this is something we have to do. Yeah. And here we move as a family to Hong Kong. Yeah.
And so, you know, it's sometimes, of course, because we go over it quite quickly, but it is sometimes tough, isn't it, to sort of make those professional decisions when you have your whole private life. You have a family, you've got an extended family, you've got little kids at home. How do you make those decisions at those moments where you say, I really like to be here. It's great to have my family around, but I'm going to follow my dream. How do you do it?
It's tough. And again, one learning I had from these different expatriations, it's unless you go by yourself, but if you go with your wife or a family, it's a team experience, and you have to get everybody on board. When we moved to Asia, my wife, who's a single child, her dad was sick, was getting badly sick. So she had to make a very tough call. And we made it together. I mean, we said, okay, let's go. And we found a solution for her to go back on a regular basis and see her father. But it was a tough life decision, I would say, beyond the professional career. And I think even today, when I send people now I'm the one sending people over the world. And I always keep in mind that probably 50% of the success rate is with the family and the private life. That if people feel good in a location where the family feels good, then you did 50% of the integration. You should not miss that and forget that, because it's very important for expatriates to be in the right conditions to perform their jobs.
Yeah. So a good reason to go is if you feel like, I think my whole family is behind this. Maybe on the other hand, if the family says, you know what, we're happy where we are, we don't want to move, maybe you don't have to push the envelope. Is that the other side of the medal? Would you agree?
Absolutely. I would not. And I always make sure that it's, again, the family is behind. Because at the end, it's people's decision, but I would recommend not to go, because it's not an easy experience at some point. And both when we went to the US, when we went to Asia, we didn't know a single person. So you start from nothing again.
Yeah.
It's like the confinement. You are alone with your wife and you don't know anyone else. So you have to learn how to live this new experience each time. And if you're not strong in your family, it can create instability.
Right. Now you end up going to Asia, and I want to make sure we get to the questions of the students. There's a lot of people
Sure.
on the Q&A as well. Just to finish up that story, of course, you go to Hong Kong, fantastic city, especially at the time. But of course, you get there, and there's a lot of internal dynamics in China too, particularly for the luxury market. At some point, luxury gifts, watches is very en vogue among a certain class. Then it gets cracked down on. So what happens to your Chinese dream, so to speak?
Yes, it did. And with the brand I was working for, it was a totally different experience from the US. In the US, the brand was doing poorly and I had to fix it. In Asia, the brand was already strong and I had to bring it to the next level. And my predecessor, he gave me a couple of tips, but he gave me one. He told me, Julien, America is very difficult for luxury watches, but Asia, it's super easy. It always go up, no problem. You will see Hong Kong is on fire, China is developing. It's gonna be fantastic. So he was telling me the truth for 3 years. But obviously, as you just said, in 2014, when the new government was elected in China, when anti-corruption measures took place, when the umbrella revolution started to happen in Hong Kong, the whole business model was kind of challenged, and we had to adapt and think how we go over it and how we continue to build the business in a different way.
And how do you do it? Because if the 50% of the market is gifts, relationship gifts, and then they say no more relationship gifts, how do you recover from that?
But you get a hit. All the brands got a big hit during this period for sure, and then you have to rebuild by going to look for more clients, more end clients, direct end clients. And the gifting was step by step disappearing. So you have to find a way to compensate. And it's developing boutiques, it's developing brand awareness, it's developing affinities with the clients. And basically you work harder. And it took probably 18 months to 24 months to reach back to the levels we had before the crisis.
Yeah.
It was a tough, but on the other hand, we were happy that it was happening in a country like China with such a big demographic and such a hunger for luxury goods, because we could recover. I mean, by doing a good job, opening up boutiques in new cities, developing the business in the whole country, we could catch up pretty quickly.
Yeah. And then, of course, you do a pretty good job. You say that. You've been with this company now for more than 15 years. Why not stay? Maybe one day you'll reach the top of the company. So much more opportunities to explore. But then a fateful day, a fateful call, and you get a call from one of our previous guests, Jean-Claude Biver.
Absolutely. The
How did that go?
only, of course. Yes, you know him. He can be quite convincing. And I was already questioning about my next step. And when he called me, and he first of all, he asked me different questions about what I did, because we had met previously a couple of times, and he knew very well what I did for the Vacheron Constantin brand in the US. And this is more or less what he had in mind for Zenith, to put the whole brand back on track. So we had a 45 minutes conversation, which is quite long for Jean-Claude Biver, seated during 45 minutes. And then he asked me, Julien, I want to meet with you again. When can you come to Switzerland to meet with me? I said, tomorrow. I said, what, tomorrow? It was a Thursday. And he said, okay, tomorrow I cannot, but Monday. So I literally flew during the weekend, and I got to meet him on Monday, where we went in details into the project.
And then you decide, difficult decision, because, you know, good opportunity here, good opportunity there. You said, I decide I am going to work for Zenith, and I'm going to be take that opportunity. Why?
I would say there are quite a few reasons, but definitely, I mean, becoming a CEO of the brand was the next step I was looking for, because I had been sales director, I had been in the key markets, so I really felt like having the full 360 view on the brand's development. A second reason was the brand itself, because I always kept an eye on Zenith, and I knew it was such a beautiful brand that had been underestimated, and there was a real leverage. Because when you pick up a job, if you come after a manager, a CEO, or a team that squeezed all the lemons, you know, there is not much juice to get, and you can be there,
right.
as CEO, okay, you sit in the chair, but you're not going to bring much to this brand. And I knew with Zenith, the leverage was still very big. And then last but not least, of course, and very key reason was to work next to Jean-Claude Biver, who for me is not only a legend, he's not only one of the top 3 people we had in the watch industry for the last 30 years, but he's also one of the most energizing person I've ever met. And you had him with you, so you know him. He's someone that if you're down, if you don't know where to go, if you have doubts, and doubts are so important for people in life, he's the one that will show you the way. He's the one that will help you to go. So for me, with all these 3 elements, it was a go, for sure.
Absolutely, and that's where you are today. We'll talk a little bit more about where you are and where Zenith is today, but now I'd like to turn to a couple of students who've been waiting to ask their questions, and I want to go first to Philip. Philip, who's actually in Villeneuve in Switzerland, so not too far from us either. He's doing his BBA at EU in Montreux. Philip, why don't you go ahead and ask us your question?
Hi, Philip.
Hello, Mr. Tornare. I wanted to ask you a quick question. You talked about your career. You moved a lot, America, China. What is the biggest challenge you had to overcome in your career that make you work your way up?
I mean, there have been quite a few, but I would say the most difficult part of the business is is people, basically. It's the best part, but it's also difficult to manage people and to get people on board, you know. And I think when you go for a new job, often your boss will ask you to change things and to develop a new strategy and to implement new tools into the business and in order to reach the objectives. And I would say one of the most challenging is then to change the perception of the people, because when you arrive on a new job, first of all, everybody's scared because they believe you're going to change the team. And I never did. I mean, on every single jobs that I took over, maybe it's wrong. Maybe in management schools today, we are taught to bring your own team with you. But I made the decision, first of all, to describe where I wanted to go with the brand, what I want to do with the brand, and then to convince the people to get on board with me. And it's been each time a challenge, because you arrive, nobody knows you, they don't trust you, a bit like the retailers before. And you have to do it internally with your staff, and you have to do it externally with the partners. And for me, it's always been the most challenging part. Once you get people jumping on the same boat as you are standing, things are starting to build, and this is the beginning of it. But for me, this is always the first phase that's the most challenging.
Maybe Julien has a follow-up to that, because we see some students also online,
Yeah.
Chris Boudet and Gabriela Miteva, asking some questions about, maybe the most challenging moment is one that you didn't even realize that happened, which is to enter the industry and to get you a shot to begin with. And in your case, of course, you were lucky enough that you had that connection, and it came sort of as a serendipitous call. Any advice for people who are starting out today, who'd like to go into the luxury industry, or people who don't have that friend's mother that can get to such a serendipitous call?
It's totally true, and I think I've been someone fighting for a long time about the industry, the watch industry specifically, to be a bit closed on itself. When I hired people, sometimes my boss was telling me, does she or he have any experience in the watch business? I said no, but he or she is a specialist in retail or in CRM so this is okay. Watches you can learn on the job, and I think we need to be much more open. So if I had something to say, I would say we hire people, first of all. I personally hire personalities. I ask people to have an entrepreneurship spirit, and it seems a bit like, yeah, everybody's asking this, but it's really true. I ask people to bring new ideas. Last year, but of course this year the same, I did to my executive committee that they had to bring 5 innovative ideas, initiative, new things. So I like when I meet or interview, of course you need to be motivated, you need to have the right personality, but you need to bring with new ideas. You need to refresh me because I'm already surrounded by people from the watch industry. So this is an advice I would give for sure.
We've got a lot of those people on the call as well, and one person that I'd like to bring up next, and I think it's very appropriate to do it now, is Natalie Nicole, who's I think somewhere in Southern California. It must be early in the morning. Natalie, you had a question I think that's quite related to that, isn't it?
Yes, definitely, and thank you so much for your time today, Mr. Tornare.
Hi, Natalie.
Hi. So my question is related to people.
Yeah.
And given the social climate right now with racial injustice, racial tensions in the US and globally, what would be your advice in terms of improving the luxury industry with diversity and inclusion practices?
Well, it's a great question, of course, because of the actual situation, but also because we are working in a global world. I mean, we are, and again, Swiss watch industry tend to be very much about not so many Swiss actually, but many French people, some Swiss, some Europeans, and step by step we opened up more and more to the world. And today, I mean, for me, it's you enrich your organization. The more you have people from different background, different ethnicity, different country of origins, whatever you want, the more you enrich your organization. We want to sell our product to the whole world. How come only Swiss, French people can understand the world? There is no way. So we are, and I'm happy to be part of the LVMH Group, which is very clear on all the aspect of non-discrimination. I mean, gender and everything. We are very, it's a very, very actual topic that we share a lot between CEOs, and it's been for me, it's very natural with my own background, my own personality. But I think it's very important in today's world to put it on paper and to go for it. So that's the way we do, yeah.
There's of course.
I'm trying to have as many nationalities as possible in our company.
Do you have an idea of how many nationalities are in your company?
I would say we have probably more than 20. We're not a big company, but we have easily 20 different nationalities for sure.
Because of course there's the aspect of sort of, let's say, the pressure that comes, the stick, if you will, the pressure that comes from people that are protesting and people that are objecting to certain practices, and who say, if you don't change your practices, we will not buy your brand anymore. We will publicly shame you, etc., etc. That's let's say the negative reason to do it, which is that if you don't do it, you're going to suffer. There's also a positive reason to do it, which is to say, over time, a number of companies have realized if we put in charge of our market somebody who's local, that understands the market better, we're going to perform better. If we put in charge of our market, let's say for our line for men, for women, for X, for Y, and Z, somebody who really understands that particular segment, well, guess what? We're going to do better. You know, how has that evolved for you? Because obviously you're not your own fault, but you're of course a product of that previous generation, let's say, when it was not yet like that. How is it for you as a leader, and how have you been able to evolve your own ways in that way?
You know, again, for me, it's a question of mindset. And I always told myself and my kids when we were living in the US, when we were living in Asia, we are not from there. We have to adapt to the market. You know, we are a global brand. We sell our watches all over the world. But I mean, what's bringing the organization to the next level? Of course, you work with local people because they know the market better. But you, as a foreigner, you need to adapt. You are the one adapting, not the country welcoming you. And I think it's very important that you create this kind of dynamic, and not only by, I would say, people from HQ going to the markets, but we also bring back people from the markets to the HQ. You know, and it's not only a question of nationality, of ethnicity, of culture, of religion. It's also a question of having a good balance between markets and HQ people with different perspectives, different glasses. They see the world in a different way. And I think it's just for the good of the company, of course, the people, but good of the company to have this kind of move around. So we try to promote a lot the move between the different structures that we have all over the world. I think it's part of today's world. This is the world we live in today.
Yeah, Natalie, I was just going to quickly bring you back, if it's possible, and see if you have any follow-up questions to that, or
Sure.
Is that sort of satisfy your question?
No, that definitely answered my question, and it makes me hopeful that there are leaders like you in the luxury industry who have that mindset. So thank you.
Thank you, Natalie.
I mean, one of the questions that we also often got, and this is why I quickly came back to Natalie, is because, of course, we're also asking this perspective from people that are developing their own careers, and that might be looking not just, you know, for a company to understand what their practices are and how they hire, etc., but for themselves. How can I start a career? What's a way for me to get a foot in the door? I think you was the way you phrased it, Natalie. How can I get my foot in the door in the luxury industry? That's a question that I think applies for many people. What are some key success factors? You talked about, you know, having innovative ideas, etc. What are some other things you're looking at?
Quite a few. I mean, I could talk about the values, but I think the values of the company of LVMH. But I will tell you more about personal qualities that I'm very much focusing on when I meet people, and how I try to help people to get on board. As I said, being very, very entrepreneurial is key. I mentioned it already. In the luxury business, we tend to be a bit conservative sometimes, and I can talk for hours about brands that are sometimes turned to the past. I think today we have a lot of challenges on how we appeal to a new generation, to millennials, how we keep them interested into luxury good industry. And I think it's by bringing innovation, it's by bringing creativity. Luxury is not about repeating the past. If you do that, you're going to end up being a museum brand or a music industry. I like to ask people to bring innovation and creativity in what they do. Even though we have 155 years old as a company, we ask people to really think about not so much the best practice, as we tend to say, but the next practice. What are going to be the next practice? And this is why we've been hiring people that were coming from different sources. And some of them I met in some innovation summits that I attended, some schools, because I'm very much in contact with schools. And I want people to surprise me. Sometimes it's, the other day I hired someone who simply sent me a letter, you know, through my LinkedIn account. I try to answer to most of the letters, but that one was very interesting because he put some perspectives on how we could or we should do the business in a different way. And I thought it was such a different and interesting approach that I got in touch with this person, and we ended up hiring her. So it's
amazing.
Different entrance door, but I think try to attract attention and not give us the simple basic resume and letter.
That's excellent. I want to bring in the last student that has a question for you, Dara. Dara, who's from India but studying in Barcelona, and I think if I got it correctly, she's actually in Murcia right now. Dara, you had a question on the luxury market.
Yeah.
Hi, Dara.
It's good to meet you. And I'm doing my MBA in design management. So I wanted to ask you, like, luxury market is really competitive these days. So could you tell me the strengths of the Zenith group, or the element which makes the group different and, you know, allows the company to stay ahead of the rest of the other companies?
Thank you, Dara. It's a very good question, and all the best for your masters. We basically, Zenith, I'll try to make it short, but Zenith is a 155 years old company, watch company. So a long tradition, a long heritage. And as I said before, many brands that have a long history, they tend to repeat the past because it's reassuring. You do revival, you do tribute to XYZ edition that you did 40 years ago. You stay where you are. It's very safe in a way. But you are going to die if you continue to do that. And you have other categories of watch brands that have no history. They're just starting. Like if you set up your brand tomorrow morning, you're starting from a white sheet of paper. So you can do all the creativity, the innovation, the craziness, the colors. You start from nothing, so you cannot hurt anyone. I think it's wrong. And I learned this lesson when I met a group of people who made the famous movement El Primero in the late 60s. And I met them last year during the celebration of the El Primero, the 50th anniversary of the El Primero. And when you meet people from 80 years old, you think they're going to be conservative. You think they're going to complain about today's world, and they're going to tell you that yesterday was better than today and certainly better than tomorrow. And they told me exactly the opposite. They told me, Julien, you have to connect the past to the future. You have to continue to create. Don't repeat what we did in the 60s. Continue to be innovative, dynamic, and make 21st century watches, because the past is not against the future. The past, the tradition, I would say, is not against innovation. The tradition that they did was innovation. And if I make new watches today, they might be innovation today, but they will become tradition. So it's all connected, and you should be fine by continuing to build the brand in the long term. And I think Zenith has a very clear objective to basically be very comfortable within its past and its future. But one thing that's super important, we have to stay super authentic. And I'll tell you quickly, if I have a few more seconds, Switzerland sometimes is not the most transparent country. You know, we used to have the secret in banking, but watchmakers can be also very secretive. And they don't want to open up the doors of the manufacturer. They don't want to show you what movement they put inside. You know? And Zenith, we said from day one, if we want to catch the new clientele, where you guys have such great access to information compared to previous generation, we need to show what we're doing. So we were the first brand to open up the doors to the public of our manufacturer. And we guarantee that 100% of our watches, they have a Zenith movement, because we believe that people, they want to buy a real product. You know, they pay some money. They understand why they pay the money, but they need to buy something with content, with substance. And for me, this is the future of luxury. Luxury is not bling bling with no substance. It can happen on some trends, on sometimes. Today with the crisis, we all believe that luxury will go back to real substance, real content. And this is exactly what you get when you buy a Zenith.
Yeah, that's absolutely excellent.
It was not too long.
No, that's great. And it cited some other questions. Previously already, Jalal, for example, was asking, you know, like, you're such a luxury brand. You even used to make, apparently, movements for brands like Rolex. Is there room for such innovations or such collaborations in the current market? Or is that something you say, no, you buy a Zenith, you buy a Zenith, you buy something else, you buy something else?
Alors, we are very well known as a movement, as a great movement called the El Primero. And this is why for the first generation of Daytonas, they've been equipped with a Zenith movement. And they're actually the ones selling at the highest price if you go to auctions. So if you see one, you can buy one. It's a good investment. But no, it's today we are a brand. We are a watch brand. And of course, we are asked on a regular basis to buy some of our movement. For now, I haven't said yes. I'm not saying it's a no forever, but now I need to refocus on the brand and to develop the brand. Because, you know, Zenith has a specificity. In the past, we had been more known for the movement than for the watch itself, than for the brand itself. But
now
El Primero is the most well-known. It's like if you think about the engine of a car, but you don't know the brand or you don't know the car model. So we need first to reinforce the brand, explain to people what they get when they acquire Zenith. And of course, we have a big manufacturing capacity. So in the future, why not?
Why not? I have to say, one of the advantages or disadvantages of talking to somebody in the Swiss watch industry, they know exactly what time it is. And of course,
for sure,
we're not anymore at the primero minute, we're at the ultimo minute. I want to thank you, Julien, for such an interesting conversation. We could have gone on forever, but we've learned a lot from you. Thank you, Julien. And I hope, of course, next time we can meet in person. And for now, I want to turn over back to Luc.
Thank you very much, Peter. And thank you to everyone. Also, good luck for your studies. Enjoy your time as a student. It's a great time. I miss it sometimes. So it's refreshing for me also to see and to talk to some of you. So enjoy, and maybe we meet one day or another for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Tornare. It has been a great 1 hour spent. Thank you for sharing your experience, for sharing your optimism with our students as well. Lots of learnings again. So let's make it on campus next time so that we can have these face-to-face meetings. That's it for today's Learning from Leaders. Next meeting next week already with the CEO of Global Operations from Four Seasons Hotels and Resorts, Mr. Christian Claire. Stay safe, everybody, and see you next week. Thank you very much.